You can say a double yes. So I'm going to walk you through what we chose to do the is not against is. The is not for us that we chose, first and foremost, was we're not going to tackle this outside in. We're not going to go outside in. We're going to do this inside out. Meaning we're not going to start on this topic with thinking about PR moves, thinking about customers, thinking about investors and shareholders. We're going to start with the inside first. We're going to think about our people, and we're going to work from the inside out as opposed to coming up with statements and actions for the sake of the outside audience. We're going to start from the inside. The second thing that was important was this, and this is something that we learned through years of spending time with the best in research and everything on the understanding empathy. We said we are not going to do empathy first. And this is where people don't understand where empathy goes wrong is when you don't start with vulnerability first. Vulnerability.
That's the pathway to empathy, vulnerability, starting with yourself. This is inside out, right? What are you thinking? How do you feel about it? What are you processing? That's vulnerable first.
And vulnerable, by the way, is a word that people usually don't understand, and you have to experience it to know what vulnerable is. When you speak and you feel raw, you feel that someone could use what you said against you, now you're in the arena on vulnerability. It doesn't matter what skin color, it doesn't matter who, but when you speak, you know that part where you feel like you can hear your heartbeat in your ears, like when you feel your heart racing and you're scared because people who are haters use your vulnerability against you. But that vulnerability, and I'll walk through kind of how to make sure you don't get hurt in the process, but vulnerability first, because what we found was this: a lot of leaders are told in their evaluations and their performance evaluations as a leader, you have to be more empathetic. You have to be more empathetic. And so we've had many people, including the toughest in the military and the CIA, come to us saying, how do I do that?
How do you go?
How do I just become more empathetic? And we said, what we've learned is this: when you practice vulnerability, you will learn to be empathetic. When you practice sharing your own pain in a vulnerable way with others, you can then feel the pain of others. So vulnerability first, then empathy. And then the last one was this: we're not going to focus on the junior side first. We're going to focus on the senior side because they have a lot of challenges in this. Now, when I think of how we went about this, we helped build what we call a gated process. As almost everything we do, a gated process. And a gated process, I want you to think of it this way. This side is safe. And the further we go out, it gets more and more dangerous. So safe to danger and going in steps.
Sorry. Assuming they can see it, I just can't say it. Yeah, it's all good, right?
Can you guys see the screen? Yeah,
Okay.
I made it a little smaller.
Okay.
All right, so safe versus danger. The first thing we ask them to do is write down for yourself, right? So self written down, right? What your journey has been on this topic of race. Journey growing up, encounters both good and bad, leading up to the Black Lives Movement and current events and what it's conjuring up in your thoughts and emotions. It's the first thing we asked them to do, right? The next thing we asked them, I'll put a different color, easier to see. We asked them to share it with one other leader within our leadership team. And this happened literally over this past weekend. Then we asked them to share in a small group of 6 to 7 people, right, what they wrote. And each time they're writing, it's refining, because every time they share it, they're remembering more pieces. Before sharing it then with their subordinates, with other people. So I'm going to show you 2, without showing you their names, of what came out as they did this. So this is one of our leaders. I'll just give you a second to read this. So this is a snippet of her 2-page write-up, a 3-page write-up. If you can just give me a thumbs up once you read it so I can move on. Still reading? Virginia, I'm looking at you since, yeah, okay, all right. So here's an example. Our company actually, for the size we are, is arguably one of the most diverse companies you will see. But different people have different prejudices that is bringing to light. Our employees that came from China have, I mean, there's gender prejudices. There was a one-child policy that made literally girls, women, like they would abortions to putting girls in dumpsters because they want a boy. And so being female, the things that's bringing up and how to deal with that. And yes, it's not a Black Lives Matter movement, but that's what this thing is conjuring up, and they don't know how to process that. In this case, this
individuals from India, right?
Right?
So it's bringing up totally different feelings.
But it's not that different. Separately, I'm just giving you a snippet from another leader who's actually a white individual, a senior white leader. I'll give you a second to read this. So I'm just looking at, okay, Virginia's giving me the heads up. I'm sharing this because in this case, I know one of the, you can't say this, is associating protesters with looting and rioting, because that seems like that's now, supporting the police in this case, and maybe the wrongdoing that's happening and emphasizing what is bad coming out of this. And yet, I love how this individual said, to me, this is, most people are looking at it in the news, consuming it through social media. I'm experiencing it very locally, and I don't know how to process that because what I'm seeing in my own eyes doesn't feel right. Yet, like, it's not about movement, it's about violence occurring in front of my eyes from both sides. And so what we found was the senior leadership, once again, coming back to the very beginning, they have never been trained to actually talk about this topic of race at work. And so they've been almost told, you cannot talk about this. And now they're being forced to talk about it, but it's conjuring up all kinds of emotions and memories and different things. And they needed the space to process. And as we worked aggressively to give them this safest space to then move out into larger, less safe spaces, we saw them come into the discussions, come and guide and help, to the point where they mentored and coached two sets of two junior leaders sharing this traumatic experience from past to even in our own company over the last 2.5 weeks in front of strangers at this morning's COA and one happening right now. And once again, we are nowhere near at the full other side of it, but.
Yeah. Can you go to this last slide, the summary slide?
Oh, yeah.
Just to kind of in summary, I think some people are also asking kind of the process that we went through, the is not is, just having gone into the arena on this. Again, I think that blue gated process that Charlie drew out, this is really, think about, say, circles of safety. Your empathy, your vulnerability should be reserved to people that you feel you can trust, right? Otherwise it will be used against you. And so it's learning to start small and then build out. In our case, writing it down for yourself, sending it to one other person, then going to 6 or 7 people, and then to our entire company. We did that very quickly. That took almost less than a week, I would say. I think over the weekend, the process of self-writing and then sharing with one other person, then all of our leadership team, and then, the whole company. And I think this is the part that you go out of theory and get into practice. This is what's needed to actually get the conversation out there in a way that won't hurt you, right? It still will hurt. I think there's going to be stuff that hurts, I think, but it's just a safer way to ramp up into more danger.